You will address me by full title and standing.
Every delegate here observes that protocol. Someone bring me my coffee. We're gonna be a while.
Nobody at the Salvani Coalition Peace Summit had been given Caelen Orvath's actual rank. This was deliberate. The Coalition Diplomatic Office had listed him on the delegate manifest as Technical Advisor, Earth Representation, Secondary Classification, which was the kind of designation that told experienced political minds precisely nothing while implying competent but minor. He wore no insignia beyond a small silver emblem on his left shoulder, the kind of mark that could belong to any mid-tier administrative function. He arrived without an entourage, carried his own briefing documents, and had spent the summit's first 2 days in back corridor conversations with junior aides while the senior delegates postured in the formal sessions. 3 people in the building knew what Caelen Orvath actually was. One was his aide, Pressa, a quiet woman who had worked with him for 4 years and communicated her full understanding of any given situation through the precise degree of stillness she maintained when events began accelerating. One was Admiral Sylvain, the silver-haired head of the Earth delegation, who had specifically requested Caelen for this summit and had spent 2 days watching him from across rooms with the specific patience of someone who had wound a mechanism and was waiting for it to engage. The third was Caelen himself, who found the entire question of rank considerably less interesting than the problem it was attached to. The problem was General Kraeth-Vor. The Salvani Dominion's senior military commander had attended the summit not as a diplomat but as a demonstration. Everything about his presence, the 7-member armored escort, the seating position chosen to require other delegates to look slightly upward when addressing him, the measured pace at which he reviewed documents while others spoke, was a performance of dominance conducted so thoroughly and consistently that most of the room had absorbed it as simply the natural order of things. He had been dismantling the coalition's proposed border agreement for 2 days through the specific technique of treating every human position as a premise requiring his personal validation before it could be taken seriously. His tone toward the Earth delegates had the quality of someone correcting children who have wandered into a conversation beyond their comprehension. Caelen had observed this for 47 hours. On the morning of the 3rd day, when Kraeth-Vor interrupted the Earth delegation's opening statement for the 4th time in 11 minutes to deliver an unsolicited commentary on human strategic limitations, Caelen set down his stylus, folded his briefing document, and walked to the center of the room. Nobody had asked him to. His manifest designation didn't authorize it. The senior Earth delegate's expression when Caelen moved suggested she had not been informed this was going to happen, though she neither stood to stop it nor looked particularly surprised. He stopped 2 meters from Kraeth-Vor. The general's crimson eyes tracked him with the slow, deliberate attention of a predator that has not yet decided whether something is significant. Technical advisors, Kraeth-Vor said, his translator rendering the Salvani contempt with clinical accuracy, do not address the floor. Return to your seat. Caelen looked at him for a moment. I want to cover 3 things, he said conversationally, as if Kraeth-Vor had said nothing at all. The border mapping in Sector 7, the resource corridor interpretation, and the enforcement mechanism your delegation has been mischaracterizing since the first session. He glanced toward the door. Someone bring me my coffee. We're going to be a while. The room did not move. Kraeth-Vor's armored escort shifted. 4 beings who had spent careers reading threat assessments and were currently encountering a data point that didn't fit their existing categories. The young human had not raised his voice, had not assumed a combative posture, had simply spoken as if the conversation were already happening and Kraeth-Vor was welcome to participate. You will address me, the general said, his voice dropping to the register that had ended several military careers across multiple species, by full title and standing. Every delegate here observes that protocol. General Kraeth-Vor, Caelen said, the full title, delivered without irony and without particular emphasis, the way one states a fact that is accurate but not interesting. The border mapping issue exists independent of titles. I'm going to explain it regardless. Whether that explanation happens as a conversation or a presentation is entirely up to you. The silence stretched in a direction nobody in the room could quite predict. Pressa appeared at the door with the coffee. She set it on the table nearest Caelen without comment and retreated to the wall with her precise stillness, which told anyone watching that she had anticipated this moment to the minute. Admiral Sylvain, from his position at the far end of the chamber, took a slow sip from his own mug and continued watching. Caelen picked up the coffee. Then he walked to the central display and pulled up the Sector 7 maps without waiting for permission, without asking for the floor, without performing any of the deference protocols that the Salvani delegation had been using as a dominance instrument for 2 days. What followed was 90 minutes. Kraeth-Vor did not leave. This, the diplomatic analysts would note in their post-summit assessments, was significant. The general had terminated 3 previous sessions by simply departing, a technique that had consistently reset negotiations to his preferred starting position. Instead, he remained, and within the first 20 minutes, something had shifted in the quality of his attention. The contemptuous assessment had become something more careful, the posture less performed and more genuine, as Caelen moved through the sector maps with the fluency of someone who had not just read the briefings but had written several of the underlying frameworks they referenced. By the 40th minute, Kraeth-Vor was asking questions. Not rhetorical ones. Real questions, the kind a military mind asks when it has found an interlocutor it cannot dismiss. By the final session, the border agreement had a framework it hadn't had at the start of the week. Afterward, as the chamber cleared, Kraeth-Vor stood for a long moment studying the sector map that remained on the display. Then, without turning, he spoke, not to the room, to the specific point in the air where Caelen had stood. "Your classification on the delegate manifest," he said. "Technical advisor, secondary classification." "Accurate," Caelen said. The general turned. "What is the primary classification?" Caelen finished his coffee, set down the mug with the unhurried care of a person completing an action they'd already moved past internally, and offered a slight, genuine smile. "That," he said, "would require updating your title and standing protocol to include a category that doesn't currently exist in Salvani diplomatic registry." He picked up his briefing folder. "I'd suggest adding it before the next summit. It'll save time." He walked out. Kraeth-Vor stood in the empty chamber for slightly longer than dignity recommended. Then he called his senior aide and said, in a tone his staff had never heard from him before, "Find out everything the Salvani Intelligence Archive has on the human named Caelen Orvath." His aide checked. The archive had 17 lines. 14 of them were redacted.